Listen to me, you little charity case. First class is for people who matter, not for trash-wearing thrift store bargains. The words hung in the air at Gate B4 of JFK International Airport, sharper than a knife and colder than the winter wind outside. Sarah Jenkins stood frozen, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled boarding pass. She wasn't trying to steal a seat. She was begging for mercy. But mercy was a currency Greg Miller, the senior gate agent for Titan Airways, refused to accept. Sarah's eyes, red-rimmed from crying, pleaded with him. But all Greg saw was her worn-out sneakers and the fraying hem of her cardigan. He didn't see a kindergarten teacher who had just spent her life savings on a last-minute flight to Chicago because her mother had gone into cardiac arrest. He only saw a nuisance. "Please, sir," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her grief. "My mother is dying. The doctors said she might not make it through the afternoon. The economy line is so long, and I just need to get on the plane. I promise I won't sit in first class. I just need to be near the door so I can run when we land." The passengers in the priority lane adjusted their expensive suits and checked their Rolex watches, looking at Sarah with a mixture of pity and annoyance. To them, she was an interruption to their seamless travel experience. Greg let out a theatrical sigh, rolling his eyes so hard it seemed painful. He leaned over the podium, invading her personal space, the smell of his expensive cologne choking her. "I don't care if your mother, your father, and your dog are all dying," he sneered, his voice loud enough for the entire gate to hear. "Rules are rules. If you wanted priority treatment, you should have worked harder in life and bought a real ticket." The humiliation burned Sarah's cheeks like fire. She felt small, insignificant, a speck of dust in a world built for giants. She had spent 7 years teaching inner-city children, buying them lunch with her own meager salary, giving everything she had to the world, yet here she was, being treated like a criminal for wanting to hold her mother's hand one last time. Desperation clawed at her throat. She stepped forward, instinctively reaching out to touch his sleeve, a silent plea for human decency. "Sir, please, have a heart!" That was the mistake. Greg recoiled as if she were contagious, his face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "Don't you touch me!" he roared, and then it happened. His hand moved in a blur. "Smoke!" The sound echoed through the terminal like a gunshot. Sarah stumbled back, her hand flying to her stinging cheek, the taste of blood filling her mouth. The terminal went silent. Sarah stood there, the imprint of Greg's hand burning into her skin, but the pain in her heart was far worse. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the blood trickling from her split lip. She looked around, searching for a savior, for anyone to step in and say this was wrong. But the businessmen looked away, the tourists pretended to check their phones, and the influencers merely adjusted their angles to get a better shot of the crying woman. She was alone, completely and utterly alone in a crowd of hundreds. Greg straightened his tie, looking incredibly satisfied with himself. "Security!" he bellowed, playing the victim with practiced ease. "I have an unruly passenger assaulting staff at Gate B4. 2 airport security officers arrived within moments, their heavy boots thudding against the linoleum. They didn't ask Sarah what happened. They didn't look at the footage. They saw a hysterical woman in cheap clothes and a senior agent in a crisp uniform. The narrative was written before Sarah could even speak. "Mom, you need to come with us," one officer said, grabbing her arm roughly. "I didn't do anything," Sarah sobbed, her legs giving way as they dragged her toward the side. "He hit me. He slapped me." Greg crossed his arms, smirking. "She lunged at me. It was self-defense. Get this trash out of my terminal." As she was pulled away, Sarah saw the boarding sign flash for her flight. The plane to Chicago. The plane to her mother. It was leaving without her. They shoved her into a cold metal chair in a holding room. The isolation was suffocating. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her mother's nurse. "She's asking for you, Sarah. Hurry!" The message shattered whatever resolve she had left. She was going to miss it. She was going to miss the goodbye. Panic transformed into a cold, hard resolve. She had always been the quiet one, the one who followed rules, the one who didn't want to bother anyone. But today, the world had broken her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking so hard she could barely type. She scrolled past her friends, past her colleagues, all the way to a contact she hadn't dialed in 5 years. The name stared back at her. Dad. He wasn't just a father, he was Thomas Jenkins, the United States Secretary of Transportation. He was the man who chose his career over his family, the man she vowed never to need. But as the taste of blood lingered on her tongue, Sarah realized she didn't have a choice. She pressed call. It went to voicemail. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking into a million pieces. "I know we don't talk, but a man just hit me. I'm bleeding, and they won't let me see Mom. Please, I need you." 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., the air inside the Department of Transportation's conference room was stale. Thomas Jenkins sat at the head of a mahogany table, listening to a drone of budget reports. He was a man of steel and stone, a legendary figure in politics who rarely showed emotion. His phone, resting face down, vibrated softly. He ignored it. It vibrated again. A specific pattern he had set years ago for emergency contacts. He frowned, flipping it over. A voicemail from Sarah. His heart skipped a beat. They hadn't spoken since the divorce, since he chose the White House over her high school graduation. He excused himself, stepping into the marble hallway. He pressed play. Sarah's broken voice filled his ear, sobbing, pleading, terrified. "He hit me, Daddies. I'm bleeding. Titan Airways, Gate B4, asking for help. Mom is dying." The color drained from Thomas's face, replaced instantly by a shade of red so dark it looked like fury incarnate. The calm politician vanished. In his place stood a father who had just realized his greatest failure and his only chance at redemption. His hand gripped the phone so tightly the screen nearly cracked. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He walked back into the conference room, silenced the room with a single raised hand, and looked at his chief of staff. "Get the FAA administrator on the secure line, now, and get me the CEO of Titan Airways." "Sir, we're in the middle of—" his aide started. "I said now!" Thomas's voice thundered, shaking the walls. Within 10 minutes, a convoy of black federal SUVs was screeching out of the D.C. headquarters. But the real storm was digital. Thomas issued a direct executive order, an emergency operational audit. At JFK Airport, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Phones began to ring at the Titan Airways corporate office. The CEO, Cynthia Vance, was pulled out of a lunch meeting with news that the Department of Transportation had just red-flagged their entire operating license. "What do you mean, grounded?" she screamed into her phone. "All of it," her VP stammered. "Every Titan flight in the country is on a ground stop. The Secretary of Transportation personally ordered it. He says we have a security threat at JFK Gate B4. Back at the holding room, the door flew open. It wasn't a police officer. It was the airport director himself, pale as a ghost, holding a phone out to Sarah. "Miss Jenkins," he stammered, sweating profusely. It's for you." Sarah took the phone, her hands still trembling. "Sarah." Her father's voice was thick with emotion, a tone she hadn't heard in decades. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm handling it. Are you okay?" Sarah let out a sob she had been holding back for hours. "I just want to see Mom." "You will," Thomas promised, his voice turning to steel. "Look out the window." Sarah looked. A private government jet was taxiing onto the tarmac, right next to the Titan terminal. "I'm coming to get you, but first, I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you again." Outside in the terminal, chaos had erupted. Federal agents, not airport security, swarmed Gate B4. Greg Miller, who had been laughing with a coworker about the trash he took out, suddenly found himself surrounded by men in FBI windbreakers. "Greg Miller!" an agent barked. "You're under arrest for federal assault and violation of civil aviation rights." Greg's smug smile vanished. "You can't touch me. I followed protocol. She was the daughter of the Secretary of Transportation," the agent interrupted, slapping handcuffs on him tight enough to bruise. The color drained from Greg's face. The passengers who had watched silently now gasped, phones recording the instant karma. Titan Airways didn't just lose a gate agent that day. They lost their reputation. The stock plummeted 40% in an hour as news leaked that the Secretary's daughter was assaulted by staff. Sarah was escorted out of the holding cell not as a prisoner, but as a VIP. She boarded the private jet, arriving in Chicago just in time to hold her mother's hand as she woke up from surgery. Her father walked in an hour later. He looked older, tired, but for the first time, present. He didn't say a word about his job or his meetings. He just hugged her, and Sarah realized that while she had lost faith in the system, she had found her father again. Greg Miller spent the next 3 years in federal prison, and every time he looked at a plane, he remembered the slap that cost him his life. Moral of the story: power isn't always loud, and wealth isn't always visible. Treat every human being with dignity, because you never know who you are actually talking to. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. We bring you the best stories every single day.